3 Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Link in the description. Hello you sexy beasts, welcome back to War Thunder. This is the M60 Tier 5 American medium tank. It has a battle rating of 8.0 and features a 105mm modification of the L7 gun from the Leopard 1. This gun can carry a total of 57 rounds. You also get a 7.62mm machine gun on the coax and a 12.7mm machine gun in this turret on the top of the tank, which can be used to spot targets, deal with lightly armored targets, not so effective against aircraft however. The shells you can carry are exactly the same as the Leopard 1. Your stock shell is an APDS shell which gets 303mm of penetration at close range and 277mm of penetration at 1 km distance. Note the rather low penetration against heavily angled armor however. At 30 degrees you only get 123mm of penetration at closer ranges. The shell is completely free and travels at 1478 meters per second, which is absolutely awesome for sniping long range targets and just overall makes your life that much easier when trying to go for those mobile targets, long range targets, hitting anything, hitting weak spots. Everything. This thing is awesome. The first unlockable shell is the HEATFS shell, which features 145mm of penetration at any range and any angle, and travels at 730 meters per second, which is just about half of the velocity of the APDS shell. Do keep in mind that the shell costs 310 silver lines per shot to fire and is overall not really that effective. And finally, the last unlockable shell is the HEATFS shell, which features 400mm of penetration at any range on flat armor. And even against angled armor at the 30 degrees angle, you still get 199mm of penetration. The shell itself travels at 1173 meters per second, which is still decently fast, not quite as fast as the APDS shell, but since it retains its penetration over range and over angling, this is the best penetrating shell in the game and for this tank. Do keep in mind however that the shell costs 1200 silver lines per shot, which means that if you spam the shell too much you are going to go bankrupt very easily. As for the gun handling, it is actually extremely good. The M60 gets some amazing turret rotation speed, anywhere between 16.8 to 24 degrees per second depending on the state of your tank and your crew. The vertical travel is between -9 and +19 degrees, which is still more than enough to deal with targets over hills. And you also get a travel time of 2.8 to 4 degrees per second on the vertical, which isn't the best around. But as long as you take care and aim beforehand, before you cross a corner, you shouldn't have too many problems with that. The gun reloads a little bit slower than the Leopard 1, having a between 10.8 and 8.3 second reload, which is still decently fast. It's anywhere between 6 to, I'd say, 8 rounds per minute, which is enough to deal with multiple targets in quick succession. Now, unlike its German counterpart, the Leopard 1, the M60 is actually very heavily armored. The upper plate, as you can see, has between 180 to 200mm of effective thickness, which is decent enough to bond some APDS shells, especially when trying to angle the tank a little bit. Not APDS, sorry about that, APHE shells. But at this tier, APDS and heat shells will have no problem punching straight through you. The lower plate is actually a surprise. Normally on most American tanks the lower plate is actually a weak spot, not so much on the M60, ranging from anywhere between 300 to 330 millimeters of effective armor on the upper part of the lower plate. The lower part of the lower plate is of course a little bit weaker, having anywhere between 180 to 100 or to 200 millimeters of effective thickness. But due to the extreme angling, you are actually quite likely to bounce APHE shots quite a lot. The gun mantle features around 220mm of effective thickness, with this outer rim here having 50.8mm, but counting as spaced armor, as there is another, as the other turret cheeks just behind that, which have 178mm of armor, and are around it as well. I mean that the further down you go the turret, the more armor you're going to have, having anywhere between 200 to 250 millimeters of armor. The turret ring, however, is a major weak spot, having only about 130 to 140 millimeters of effective armor flat on. When you're facing an M60 from the front, go for the turret ring. This is by far the easiest spot to penetrate. Actually, I'm telling a lie, because we have this massive tumor of the machine gun turret. Now, APDS shells won't really do anything against this thing, same as heat shells, but a well-placed APHE shell, especially from the 122mm guns of the, for example, IS-4M, the IS-3 or the T10M, they penetrate and they explode and just kill everything inside the turret. APHE shells against the turret it's deadly. This thing is literally a tumor on this tank. Side armor isn't anything special. You get 76mm on the frontal part, 50 on the back, and another 76 on the turret sides. Now, given the rather, well, underwhelming armor on the side, it is actually advised to not angle this tank too much, especially the turret. You shouldn't angle the turret whatsoever. Just keep the turret straight on towards the enemy at all times. The hull, you can try and angle it a little bit, but it won't really help you out that much, and it will just expose your turret ring that much more. As a general rule of thumb, you want to engage your enemies from the front. As for mobility, the M60 reaches a top speed of 48 km per hour. The tank itself weighs 46.2 tons and has a 750 horsepower engine once fully upgraded, which gives it a actually very good power-to-weight ratio of 16.2 horsepower per ton. However, that power-to-weight ratio isn't exactly true. Due to all that armor and all that mass, this tank feels extremely sluggish when actually driving it. It has very poor acceleration and very poor hull traverse, which we are going to see in the gameplay coming up now. Alright, so as a challenge to myself, I set out to actually use this thing without APDS to get a feel for the tank as if it was stock. The rest of the tank is still upgraded, but we have the stock ammo choices here. And the results were actually quite surprising. We are on, if I'm not mistaken, this is Finland. I always keep confusing Finland with Norway. I don't know why. Just both Nordic maps, and even though one is on tanks and one is on aircraft, I just confuse the name. Sorry. Hey, we are taking out the M60. This is, by the way, a camo I got from live.warfare. I'm going to leave it down in the description down below for you to download. But so as you can see, the top speed of this thing is actually quite good. However, I do seem to have trouble getting from the spot. It depends a lot on the terrain as well. Now, if you're going on sand, this thing is actually quite mobile, as every tank is. I don't know exactly what is wrong with the not L-Haluf, that's a World of Tanks map. That desert map, the big desert map. I forgot the name right now. Well, you know what I'm talking about, the one with the big dunes. It seems like they somehow reduce the ground resistance on those sand dunes, because your tanks are much faster there than anywhere else in any map, which is amazing, because that is supposed to be sand, but I can say that for the sake of having larger maps, you have to get more mobility. Now, another terrain though, the M60 isn't quite as good. You definitely struggle getting up to speed, you definitely struggle getting your hull turned around. Now, of course, the turret rotation speed is absolutely amazing for that. You get, in the current configuration I have, about 24 degrees per second, which is absolutely awesome. You can just whip the turret around and shoot at anything. But, given with the slow hull traverse, it can actually be quite complicated using your armor effectively. Talking about the armor, well, as we saw, the M60 is quite heavily armored, unlike its Leopard counterpart. It pays for that in terms of mobility, of course. The Leopard is much faster, especially when you're coming from the Leopard flying the M60. It's a completely different tank. This feels more like a heavy tank than a medium tank, while the Leopard feels more like a light tank. But all this armor isn't really all that effective when you go up against the Leopards. And this is the main problem with the M60. The armor is good and excellent when you face off against stuff that doesn't have either APDS or HEATFS shells. However, at this battle rating, almost everything has APDS or HEATFS shells. Now, given that if you face a mouse, it is actually quite interesting. Let me show you a clip. Well, in the end they did get me there, but as you can see, the mouse did bounce quite a lot of shots of me. However, as you can notice, my HEATFS shells weren't quite doing their work in that gameplay. And here's my theory. The game meta has completely changed. Now, up until the last patch, the HEATFS shell was just dominating everything. It was basically a APDS shell on steroids. Whereas the APDS shell had trouble penetrating angled armor and wouldn't create much spalling, and even then wouldn't do much damage. The HEATFS shell would just punch straight through everything, no matter the angle, no matter anything, and once inside act like an APDS shell, just traveling through the entire tank, creating a lot of shrapnel and having high chances of blowing up fuel tanks and amber racks. However, it seems like that has changed completely. There's been kind of a hidden patch that I've been noticing over the last couple of weeks. Anything that has explosive filler has been nerfed, whilst APDS has been massively buffed. The stock APDS shell on this tank now does a massive amount of spalling damage. It is much faster than the HEATFS shell. It also can travel through cover, through circular cover, something that the HEATFS shell cannot do. And it seems to be doing much better against angled armor now. Not quite as good as the HEATFS shell still. The HEATFS shell can still deal with armor, but the Sabo shell doesn't bounce as much as it used to. And once inside, holy crap does this thing do damage. Lots of spalling damage, and it punches straight through the tank. It enters one side and exits out the other, which is a lot of damage. In the clip that you... Actually, I don't think I fired APDS against that tank. There's some clip that I had with myself firing APDS at the front of the mouse, and it went in one side, killed the driver, went through the entire tank, and got into the engine and exploded the fuel tanks of the engine. That's the power of the APDS shell now. And that leads me to an exciting conclusion. HEATFS shells aren't worth it anymore. I found myself having more success using APDS shells on this tank than using HEATFS shells. Now I should still carry a couple of those just in case you face a mouse, because HEATFS shell is more effective at punching through the upper plate, the angled upper plate, something that the APDS shell on this thing just can't do. However, against everything else, the APDS shell is just much better than the HEATFS shell, and it has another major what's it called, advantage. Yes, advantage. English is hard. Which is, it doesn't cost anything. Whilst you are essentially firing 1,200 silver lines each time you pull the trigger with the HEATFS shell, the APDS shell is completely free, which means you get to keep all of your earnings. And that makes a huge difference at the end of the battle. You can actually make money with the APDS shells, something that you can't really do with the HEATFS shells. And this is probably true for the Leopard as well. Now, I didn't test out the APDS shells on the Leopard last time I did a video on it, but since the gun is the same, and the penetration balls are the same, it must be exactly the same situation. Now, of course, the M60 and the Leopard are two completely different tanks in themselves. The Leopard is all about mobility, the M60 is all about armor. And, well, given that at this tier armor is pretty much ineffective, the Leopard, the M60 draws the short stick there. I don't know, man. The armor is good, but it just has too many drawbacks to actually be used effective. HEATFS shells, APDS shells can punch straight through you anyways, and all this armor just slows your tank down. This is definitely not a tank that you can use like the Leopards. This is not a flanking tank. You have to kind of set yourself up beforehand, try to cover corners. If you can, try and flank around if you can find a long strategic road, because you do have a decent top speed of 48 km/h, but it's just not a Leopard. It isn't mobile as a Leopard, it is, in all honesty, it is worse than the Leopard. Anyways, this has been it for the review of the M60. Hopefully you guys like the new format. I'm actually thinking about doing this on all videos now, doing a garage review beforehand and then going into the battle. And you can now vote for the next vehicle on the top right corner to be featured. Now, don't forget to tune in on the live stream on Friday. I'm going to be live streaming from 6 PM to 8 PM. Actually, no, 6 PM? Yeah, 6 PM to 8 PM? 4 PM? 6 PM? I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to update you guys on Twitter. Anyways, I'm going to be streaming up until probably 8 PM, 9 PM 10 PM UK time over on twitch.tv/MikeGoesBoom. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like rating if you did, subscribe if you're new around here, and as always, my name has been MikeGoesBoom. Thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines, with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay, we can wait right here and play, until somehow you can find a slightly